When you picture someone with ADHD in your mind, who do you picture? Do you picture a young child, a boy perhaps? What are they doing? Are they very active? Do they have a short attention span? Usually, if you're thinking this way, you're thinking about the stereotypical presentation of ADHD in boys. Did you know that ADHD presents very differently in girls and women? Well, that is exactly what we're going to talk about in today's video. Welcome to my channel. I'm Rebecca Robbins from Mindshaper SLP, where we aim to create fruitful and fulfilling lives for neurodivergent individuals and their families. And today I am going to share with you a video of a book club meeting. If you didn't know, I host a free autism book club for parents and professionals called Rebecca's Awesome Reads. And right now we're reading a book called Different Not Less by Chloe Hayden. Actually, we're almost finished with it. We're finishing it this week. But I had a wonderful conversation with my assistant Rebecca on one of the chapters in this book, which was all about diagnosing ADHD. And what was so great about this conversation is that Rebecca herself has ADHD and was diagnosed later on in life. And so not only did we get to hear about the author's experience in living with ADHD, but we also got to hear from Rebecca and how what the author was saying in this chapter related to her experience and whether it resonated true for her or not. It was such a great conversation. I couldn't just gatekeep it in our book club and not share it with you all. So please keep in mind while you're watching, this is a book club meeting. So it wasn't filmed with the intention of showing it as a YouTube video. And so the quality of the video is not quite what it would be if I was filming it specifically for YouTube. And you will notice just the conversational nature. But again, I thought the content was so great and so valuable that you would want to see it. So go ahead and enjoy our conversation about different, not less, and how ADHD presents in women. Hello, everybody. It is Thursday. Welcome back to Rebecca's Awesome Reads. And we are continuing, of course, our discussion on different, not less. And today we are finishing up chapter 6, which was called Seeking a Diagnosis. So last week we really delved into the autism diagnosis, and she gave us a lot of some bullet points about the history of the autism diagnosis. And then as well, just like she's done throughout this whole book, she gives some tips about how to handle your own autism diagnosis if you're neurodivergent, or also for the sidekicks in an autistic person's life, how to manage that. And she shared her own personal story as well. This week, we are delving into ADHD a little bit deeper. And I have to say, right off the bat, the descriptions that she made in this chapter about ADHD and how it presents specifically for women were really eye-opening to me and unique. I hadn't necessarily heard ADHD described in this specific detail before. And I really appreciated all of the very nuanced and specific information that she gave about ADHD. So we're definitely going to dive into that. Rebecca, are you able to unmute yourself and maybe give us just a general overview of your opinion of this second half of the chapter?
In the notes that I wrote on the chapter, because I finished the book a while ago, I
Oh,
wrote that I could have written this part of the chapter
yeah.
because I got diagnosed with ADHD when I was 30, I believe, or somewhere around there.
Mm.
And I was just like, yep, that makes sense. That's accurate. Yes, absolutely. And then when it came to the part where she's like giving advice and tips and things, I was like, oh, that is a fantastic idea. I'm going to talk with my therapist about that. I absolutely love it. So the short version is I could have written this part of the chapter myself.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah. Well, when I was reading this part of the chapter, I had you in mind because of all the meetings that we've had where you've mentioned your own ADHD experiences, and I was really interested to hear if what she had said rang true for you as well. So let's let's just go into the specifics here. Let me just make sure we're actually streaming in the group. We are. Awesome. Okay. So it starts off with talking about diagnosing ADHD. And it was really interesting to hear a little more of the history of the ADHD diagnosis and how in the DSM-2, she didn't say what year the DSM-2 was, but in the DSM-2 it was called hyperkinetic reaction of childhood. I thought that that was such an interesting diagnostic label. What did you think when you read that description, Rebecca?
I thought, unfortunately, it made sense.
Hmm.
Um, because I have got my degree in elementary education, and when I was in college, we learned a little bit about certain disabilities that people may have and whatnot. And when we were talking about ADHD, it was really geared towards the jittery kids that just can't sit still.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, that made sense given the information that they had at the time and all of that. And I'm just very thankful that things have changed today.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and that was, as we'll hear in this chapter, a big part of the reason why girls get overlooked and underdiagnosed because there is this assumption or this misconception that with an ADHD diagnosis, there has to be this stereotypical hyperactivity associated with it. And then she goes on to say that in the 1960s, it was formally recognized as a mental disorder. And then it became attention deficit disorder with or without hyperactivity in the 1980s. So it seems like in the 1980s, it wasn't until then that they started to realize, like, oh, okay, so someone can have this without having that stereotypical hyperactive motor response.
Yeah, and another thing that I've read about a lot is in women, the hyperactivity can be all in your head. So it's
Mm,
just like your brain is hyperactively thinking this, that, and the other thing and going and going and going, but physically you're totally fine with just sitting there. Your head is just off daydreaming. So like the hyperactivity piece is still can still be there, but it just presents completely
internalized.
differently.
Yeah, yeah, and she talks about that in this chapter too. Yeah, it's like really internalized, which makes it harder to recognize in girls. And we'll get there, but she also says that was it that the diagnostic criteria, like it had to be present prior to 12 years old or something like that. And that really is another reason that girls would go underdiagnosed because they're so good at masking. And also, it presents in a different way than it does for boys, who it seems that the diagnostic criteria is based upon.
Yep.
Yeah. So then she just goes through the list of how ADHD is expected to present. So it's expected with hyperactivity, impulsivity, self focused behavior, emotional turmoil like temper tantrums, emotional outbursts, struggles paying attention, tendency to lose things, lack of follow through on tasks and instructions, and symptoms. This is it, symptoms present before age of 12 and in more than one environment. So I'm just going to read that paragraph. It says the DSM-5, so that's the current diagnostic statistical manual. ADHD criteria insist that a diagnosis can only be made if multiple behaviors are recognized before the age of 12 and are noticed in more than one environment, such as school and home. This is something that is problematic with women, as ADHD women often learn to mask symptoms from a young age and therefore do not receive support or diagnosis until our adult years. Yeah.
Yep. And I know for me personally, one reason that I like didn't get noticed as a kid was because I was a smart kid. And I like one of my hyper focuses was school. I loved being in school. I loved learning new things. There's just every once in a while, and this is reflecting back on my childhood. I totally did not notice this at the time. Certain things were just boring as all snot, and I just did not want to. And it was really, I was like, this is stupid. I don't want to do this. This feels like a waste of time. And it was a huge struggle for me. And so just like it's really easy to not be noticed. And another thing is, from the teacher's perspective, I'm a lot more likely to pay attention to the kid that's disrupting my entire class because it's affecting everybody versus the one girl in the back who's just daydreaming. Well, I can still do my job if she's in the back daydreaming. And that doesn't mean that I don't care about her or I don't like it's more that I just don't notice it because my job is to make sure everyone's paying attention. And the stereotypical little hyperactive boy in the corner is the one who's disrupting everybody. So
Hmm.
it was really easy for me to just kind of not get noticed because I wasn't struggling with my grades. I wasn't disrupting the classroom. I wasn't doing all of the stereotypical things that a kid who has ADHD does. But I definitely, looking back on my childhood, I'm like, holy crap, how did anybody, like, how did nobody notice this? Because it's so blaringly obvious to me.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really great point that, one of the reasons that it's more identifiable in boys, especially young boys, is because that you have no choice but to attend to the fact that that little boy who has ADHD is like interrupting, calling out, bouncing out of his seat. But a girl who's presenting like you did might just be interpreted as shy. So maybe I'm not sure, but maybe did you get like comments on a report card saying like could increase class participation, maybe, you know, and but not but again, because it wasn't disrupting the ability of the teacher to do her job, it doesn't get recognized as easily. That's a really good point.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So then she goes on to talk about how ADHD may appear in women. And I had highlighted this part that says we are master maskers, are taught to comply, and often showcase inattentiveness, hyperactivity, and impulsiveness in ways that aren't seen as socially disruptive as they are in males. So that's exactly what we were just talking about. So in women, it can present as inattentiveness, but girls may experience ADHD in a more internalized way, like we were saying, hyper focus as compensation. Girls with ADHD are often incredibly good at hyper focusing on something we like or are good at. And like you were saying, Rebecca, you were really interested in learning and the tasks of school. So it was easy to hyper focus on that. So I would imagine really easy to fall under the radar there. People often dismiss the possibility of ADHD and attribute our behavior to defiance or laziness. So, because girls are able to present that hyper focus when they're interested in something, but then when they're not, that's when the inattentiveness seems to present itself. There's that misconception like, oh, you're just lazy. You don't want to try if it's not interesting to you, which is not true. And she says later on in this chapter that your brain gets a dopamine hit or a chemical reaction, like it says your brain rewards you with a chemical reaction when you engage in something that's interesting and motivating to you inherently, and you don't get that same brain chemistry reaction when you do things that you're not already wired to be interested in. So it makes sense that it's literally a difference in brain chemistry and brain wiring, and not um, a willful disobedience or
Yeah. Yep.
willful unwillingness to comply.
Yeah. And I've seen people talk about how like the difference between laziness and ADHD is if you're lazy, you're like, I know I should, I don't know, wash my dishes right now, but I'm choosing not to. I'm making the choice to sit here and do something else because I can. Whereas for me with ADHD, it's like I literally cannot get myself to do the thing. Meanwhile, I'm having a conversation with myself about how I need to do the thing. And I wish I could just get up and do the thing. And it's like, I feel so stupid and I felt really stupid before getting diagnosed with ADHD because I was like, what why can't I do this? This is like I know what I need to do. I know why I need to do it. I know that it's important and yet here I am not doing the thing. Like why is this so difficult? And another thing for me was just like when I was a kid growing up when my parents said, like do the dishes or clean your room or whatever, it was such a struggle for me. And at that point in time, I was like, how do people overcome this? Like, how are my parents able to just wash the dishes after we have supper? Like, I don't like this feels impossible to me. And then now as an adult, I'm like, oh, because that's not what it feels like for everyone. It's what it feels like for me. Like
Mm,
that's the problem. The problem is not like me doing it. The problem is how my brain is thinking about it and feeling about it. So
right.
it's I look at my childhood completely different now that I understand like what was going on in my brain.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And what you're that story that you're just talking, like with that specific example of doing the dishes, I just saw a TikTok yesterday that was posted by, I believe it was someone who had a PDA profile of autism. And for anybody watching who doesn't know, PDA stands for, I like to say, a persistent drive for autonomy, but the medical term for it is pathological demand avoidance. So the video started off with her washing the dishes. And then, like, she comes in playing a different character. She's like, "Hey, would you mind washing the dishes?" And then all of a sudden, she was like, literally in the middle of washing one. She was like, "That's it. Nope. Done. Can't do it now." And then she really broke it down and explained why she had that reaction as someone with a PDA profile of autism. And it's because with their brain chemistry is structured so that anytime their autonomy seems even in the least bit threatened, like somebody asking them to do something, even if they're already in the process of doing it, it causes their system to go into fight or flight because they panic that they no longer have control over their life or what they're doing. And so she went on to say how, so the person's like, "Oh, how should I say it instead?" So she said, "You could give me choices like, hey, can you wash the dishes? Do you want to do it now or would you rather do it later?" And I thought that that was a really great strategy. And also, declarative language is really great way to help relieve that demand off of the language when you're talking to someone. So like that just reminded me the how it really does make a difference how your brain is wired. And if the other people in the environment can understand that, like, if you approach this a different way with me, it will impact my brain chemistry differently and I will be
Yeah.
successful.
Yeah, and I've seen ADHD described as being a dopamine deficiency. And so I'm the same way. Like, don't freaking tell me what to do because you just stole the dopamine out of it for me. Like, I was going to be a big girl and I was going to be an adult and I was going to do this thing all by myself. And I found a way to trick my brain into thinking it's going to be super fun to get me that rush of dopamine I need. And now you just told me to do it and you stole it. So now I'm like, I don't want to anymore. And so
Hmm.
it's just, it's so fascinating how like how different our brains can be.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I ask, what are some strategies that you have found to be helpful for you in overcoming like that resistance to do like a mundane everyday task that you has to get done, but you're just like, I don't want to do it.
Yeah, some things that I do are listening to audiobooks when I'm doing those boring things that I'd rather not because I feel like certain things just feel like a waste of time to me. And so if I'm listening to an audiobook, I'm not wasting time. I'm doing something else to keep my brain a little bit more occupied while I'm listening to the audiobook. And then I guess the other thing that I do is so spreadsheets are I love spreadsheets. And so I like paying my bills. I used to pay my bills late all the time because I couldn't remember to pay them. No reminder, nothing worked for me to remember to pay them. I tried all the different things. Nothing worked until I made a spreadsheet with all of my bills on it. Because my brain loves spreadsheets. If I can turn something into a spreadsheet, my brain is like, yep, we are going to do this. Like, this is fantastic. This is amazing. I absolutely love this. And so just finding my like hyper focus or finding the thing that my brain is just like, I don't care what's on this spreadsheet. I'm going to do it and I'm going to love it so, so much. So just finding
Good to know.
that, like, that works for me. It definitely will not work for everyone, but just finding a way to be like, okay, I don't want to do this, but what else can I add to it? What layer can I add to it that I will enjoy is
Mhm.
like really the biggest thing that has helped me the most.
Yeah, that's so funny that you mentioned the spreadsheet. So for anyone watching, Rebecca is my virtual assistant. So I hate spreadsheets. Like, I don't know why, but like, they're like, like paperwork, like that just for me is like a daunting task. That's how I feel like. So I tend to delegate those tasks to Rebecca. And I always feel bad delegating, like, can you make a spreadsheet of this? Because it's a task that I would dread doing, but I feel much better knowing that, like, yes, this is fun for
Oh,
me.
yeah, absolutely. But then the problem that I have is like you'll give me something to do that I need to have done tomorrow, and you'll give me something involving a spreadsheet that, oh, get that done whenever. And I'm like, I want to do the spreadsheet thing though. And so I do that first before I do the other thing that I need to have done by tomorrow. And then I'm like, shoot, I totally did these backwards. But like my brain just if it involves a spreadsheet, I love it and I will do it immediately.
Okay, I'll find ways to make things spreadsheets more often for you.
Thanks.
Okay. Um, wow, this is a great conversation. Thank you. I'm so glad that you are here today to talk about this with me. So the other ways that I've kind of lost my place here. Okay, so we're talking about how ADHD may appear in women. And we already highlighted inattentiveness, and we were just talking about hyper focus as compensation. The other one was constant motion. Um, so being constantly on the move doesn't necessarily mean that the stereotypical bouncing off the walls that ADHD is known for. Often it's smaller, more subtle ways, largely due to the fact that while we need to release energy, we're aware of the social factors causing silent judgments to be constantly cast in our directions. So we'll find ways to move that don't draw as much attention, like fidgeting and doodling. And that makes me think of how she also says that girls with ADHD are like hyper aware, self aware, and aware of how they're being perceived in social situations. Same thing as autistic girls as well. Um, did you want to say anything on that before I moved forward?
Um, First off, I have a spinny ring that I am constantly spinning when we're in meetings, and you probably had no idea ever that I'm like constantly here spinning this. Um, but also when I went to Minneapolis last week and I was waiting in line to do a meet and greet after a concert that I had gone to, and I found myself just swaying back and forth as I was standing in the line. And I was like, I probably look stupid doing this, was the first thought that I had was like, okay, I'm gonna stop because I probably look dumb. And then I just like I felt like I physically hurt on the inside because I was trying so hard to stand still. And I was like, no, you know what? This is making me miserable. I don't want to stand still. I don't care how I look if I'm swaying back and forth the whole, like, I don't even know how long I was standing in line. I kept swaying back and forth the whole time because I was feeling some anxiety over being in a big city and I had a late drive home and I was just like, I don't care. And thankfully for me, swaying back and forth in the grand scheme of life really isn't that disruptive to anybody. And so I can only imagine what it's like for people who have like bigger stims that they need to do to keep themselves regulated and things that are more disruptive and less accepted by society. So I was just like really thinking about that. And then the fact that the first thought that I had was, oh gosh, I have to stop. Like, what are people thinking of me?
Hmm.
And it makes me wonder how many other things am I repressing myself from doing because I want a mask and I want to fit in and I don't want anybody to be able to see that I'm different.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. Yeah, and I think too, as you get older and I think this goes for most people too, you realize that you care less and less about what other people think, and you're honoring yourself and your own needs more and more as we get older too. So
Yep.
it's you recognize that and were able to take care of what you needed in that moment. So other traits that she lists is difficulty making friends, messiness, low self-esteem. I thought this was really interesting, that girls with ADHD are likely to blame themselves in many situations. So she says, for example, if a boy with ADHD fails a test, he's more likely to say the test was simply too difficult. Whereas a girl with ADHD is more likely to see it as a failure on of themselves and a sign that they're not smart enough. I thought that was really interesting. And I feel like that's a gender difference in general. I feel like men in general tend to, see like the external reasons why something didn't go their way, whereas women are more apt to like take the blame or see like where it was their fault. Because I tend to do that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mental health issues, daydreaming. You were talking about this in your experience when you were a child. It says this endless daydreaming often gets us into trouble, such as missing important social cues, instructions, or assignments. But it also can be our greatest superpower. Some of the world's greatest artists and creators have ADHD and are often dreamers. And I really loved that she pointed out how it can be a benefit as well, because like a lot of these traits were pointing out how it's causing challenges in someone's life, but I liked how she made a point of saying how this could be a benefit too if you use it to your favor in your life. Chattiness. ADHD in girls gives us the tendency to overshare and overchat. Our struggle with social cues can also mean that we sometimes talk out of turn or out of place, which again leads to difficulty with friends. And she says she has a tendency to speak extremely fast. And I laughed when she was like, she has to listen to videos and podcasts on double speed.
Yep. Hi.
I do
Same.
that too, though. Yeah. And then
I
when I
like,
try to listen at regular speed, I'm like, this is so slow.
yeah. And I have times in real life where like, I don't know, like I'm having a conversation with my husband or whatever, and I'm just like, where is the 2x speed button? Like, get to the point of what you're trying to say, because and I think a lot of that is the way that my brain like processes information and the way I like remember things. If it's too slow, I'm gonna lose focus and I'm not gonna remember what we're talking about because like my working memory is absolute garbage. I can forget what I'm saying when I'm in the middle of saying it because my brain interrupted itself with a different thought. And
Hmm.
it happens all the time. And so it's just like it's literally happening to me right now. And it happens I don't even know how often where I'm like, I'm talking about something and then I'm like, wait a minute, why am I talking about this? What, like, where's the end of this? Where is the point that I'm trying to reach as these words are coming out of my mouth? Because I'm focusing on the words that I'm saying right now. And so I'm not able to think about, okay, what comes next? And then it just ends up a whole jumbled mess. And then I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on? I don't remember. And it makes certain things really, really difficult. And it's really easy for somebody who doesn't understand that to get frustrated. And that's why I interrupt so much. Like I'm able to mask it when I'm in certain situations, but like when I'm talking with my husband, I interrupt him a lot because my brain is like, say this right now or we're going to forget it. It's going to go away and it's going to be gone forever. Like we need to get it out now. So I'm not trying to be rude when I do that. It's just like I said, if I don't get it out now, it's gone forever.
Hmm.
And it's really like, it's a lot, but it also, knowing that I have ADHD makes it a lot easier to deal with because I know that it's going to happen. And so one thing that I do like during our meetings is if you say something and I'm like, "Ooh, I want to say something in response," I'm typing it out on my notes document so that it stays in my brain and I don't forget it. And
Yeah.
just trying to find little things where I'm just like, "Oh, hold on, I gotta figure out how I can get this to work for me."
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, when you do that, do you find that you end up missing other parts of the conversation because you're focusing on getting what you wanted to say down?
Sometimes,
Mhm.
but ADHD is you need this weird balance of stimulation for your brain to be able to focus. And so sometimes it's like, sometimes I have moments where I wish I could pause the other person so that I can write things down. And then other times it's like, okay, I'm multitasking right now and my brain is totally able to handle this. So it just, I don't know, it depends on the day, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, the main reason I ask is because I feel like that would be a great strategy to teach students that are having, or teachers to use with students that are having a hard time interrupting during class or whatever, can you make a little note of what you want to say that you can remember it after? Yeah. So, do you feel like you're able to make bullet points of information, or do you find that you need to write out the whole thing you wanted to say?
Usually bullet points help. Right
Yeah.
now, I typed out messiness, holding info in my head, and chattiness. Because messiness is me 110%. And then I know, like, holding info in my head, I know means that my working memory is garbage. And it's like, as long as I'm saying the things like right now, just little bullet points of stuff is enough for me to remember. But if I came back to this a week from now, I'd be like, what in the world am I talking about? Like, I don't understand this. And that happens to me a lot when I get around to like cleaning my desk. I find notes that I wrote to myself and I'm like, what were you trying to remind yourself of here, my friend? Like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, that makes sense. Were there any of those points that you jotted down that you want to speak on right now before we move forward?
Um, kind of. They're
Yeah.
just it's weird. ADHD is such a weird thing. Like right now, I can hear my dog scratching in, I don't know which dog it is, but their crate. And my brain is like, that's really important. We need to focus on that right now. And I'm like, no, we don't. We're in a meeting. Like focus on the words that are being said so that you can hear them and you can come up with a response. And my brain is like, no, listen to that. And I'm like, it's this constant battle of trying to figure out what you're supposed to focus on and getting a way to focus on it. And so it's just, it really, it really depends.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, she also there was something you were saying that the working memory. She comments on that in this chapter. I think it's in so this section that we're coming up to, ADHD traits not spoken about that much. The other thing was that she highlighted about ADHD in women is poor decision making skills, and it's this I thought was really interesting. It was kind of like a light bulb moment for me that it's partly because they a struggle to prioritize, and so all options seem equally important or significant. That makes a lot of sense to me described like that, but I never had actually like thought about decision making as that aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me, when trying to prioritize things, when I'm making decisions in general, I want to know that I'm making the right choice. Like, I want an answer key. And when you have a list of tasks that you have to do and you need to figure out what order to do them in, there is no right answer. And so I'm like, it's a struggle for me to figure that out. And then the other thing that I deal with heavily is time blindness, which I like to describe as like, if I hold my hands up and I say, how many inches is this? Some people are like, I have no idea. Like that could be 3 feet for all I know. I don't like distance doesn't make sense to me. My brain is like that, but with time. Like I understand that there's 60 seconds in a minute and there's 60 minutes in an hour, but like ask me how long it takes me to get ready in the morning and I'm like I don't know, like I literally have no idea unless I have something concrete of like a timer telling me, like, and that's why traveling is so difficult for me because I know how long the that Google Maps tells me it'll take me to drive there, but I don't know how long it's going to take me to get the vehicle ready. I don't know how long it's going to take me to find somewhere to park. I don't know how long it's going to take me to walk to the building I need to be in. I don't know how long it's going to take me to find my seat. Like my brain like that does not make any sense to me at all.
Yeah. And I think that's more about not necessarily knowing like the numbers, like, okay, this is 10 minutes long, but it's an internalized sense of what 10 minutes feels like.
Yeah.
What
Yep.
are what are comparable tasks that also take 10 minutes that you can compare it to? Like, okay, I know it takes me about 10 minutes to unload the dishwasher. So would I be able to do this in the same amount of time that I can unload the dishwasher? Probably not. I'd probably take longer, or no, it'd be faster. Like I feel like people that have strong time management or strong executive functioning skills in the area of time can do fairly easily. And yeah, that's what I kind of explain time blindness to be. It's a difficulty internalizing what the time feels like.
Yeah, like I have no idea. It'd be like asking someone, "Hey, hold up your hands and show me what 7 inches looks like." Some people can't do that. I can't do
Mm.
that with time. like at
Mhm.
all.
Mhm.
And one thing that I found I saw a video somewhere where the person was talking to their spouse who has ADHD in terms of seconds. Like we have this many seconds to do something. And she's like, "Oh, that's not a lot of time at all." But if you had told me that I have 5 minutes to do it, I've been like, "Pff, that's plenty of time." And it's just it's so it's so bizarre to me, especially like talking with my husband who does have that ability to see time. I'm just like, how do you know that? I
Mhm.
don't get it. I really don't get it. And I didn't realize I didn't get it until I got diagnosed with ADHD. And so it's just when you don't know why you don't get it, you don't even realize that you don't get it, it's just like makes everything impossible.
Hmm. Yeah, I always, when I work with my families about like time management skills, I always highly recommend using analog clocks because analog clocks are the only way to visually represent time. And you can also, a strategy that I recommend too is like, let's say you have like the getting ready, the morning routine is like takes an hour or whatever. You can actually mark on the clock like how long each activity will take, and then the child can, like with a dry erase marker, and then the child can literally see the minute hand moving through those time markers and feel for themselves like, oh, I haven't done all of these things that are already past the minute hand and I have to leave, and the minute hand's already to the point, almost to the point where I have to leave, and that way they start to feel that urgency. Because a lot of times I hear families like he'll have 5 minutes left and he's still in his pajamas and he's just like walking around like he has all the time in the world. And it's like, yes, because he doesn't have a perceived sense of time. But when you are able to put it into a visual format like that, in real time, it really does help the person internalize, like, oh, I don't have a lot of time. I do need to move faster now because I have a lot to get done before with just a little bit of space left.
Yeah, yep. And I actually found a visual countdown timer where it's a mouse eating apples, and when your time is up, he eats a piece of cheese. I downloaded that app for me. But if anybody asks, I did it for my kid.
Ah,
And we
that's
use
so
it with
cool.
her too, and it's like,
You'll have to send me the link for that.
oh yeah, absolutely. Like if I need her to put her toys away, like, okay, you got to do this before the mouse eats the cheese, and it does, it's because like my kid does not understand time. Like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
her and I have about the same understanding of how time works. And so having that visual for both of us actually helps where I'm like, if I didn't have that, I would tell her, okay, we have 5 minutes to do whatever. And then all of a sudden I would like totally forget that I'm even supposed to be paying attention to what she's doing. But having a visual timer helps both of us be able to see, okay, this is how much time went by. This is how much is left.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's really, really important to demonstrate for individuals that have challenges with time management to demonstrate time in a visual way because so much of how we show time in this day and age is digitally, and that gives zero information about the span of time. So I anyone watching, I strongly urge to use analog clocks because that can demonstrate the span of time or visual timers. I think we'll put the link to that app that you use. That sounds really cool in the chat under this video. But when you were thinking of that, another strategy that I talk about, and this is a lot of the stuff I use, have learned from Sarah Ward from Cognitive 360 Connections or Cognitive Connections 360 Thinking, I think is the company that she founded. She's amazing. Go check her out. But for people, for kids that can't tell time yet on an analog clock, you can actually put stickers on the outside of the clock next to all the numbers. And you can even open up the clock and put stickers on each of the hands. So let's say you put like a turtle on the hour hand because hours take a long time to get around the clock, and a squirrel sticker on the minute hand. And then you could say, like, let's say your child's really into sports. You can say, okay, when the squirrel gets to the soccer ball, it's time for us to leave. And so they don't need to know numbers. They don't need to know how to tell time because you're using pictures, but it's still helping them see and feel how long it takes for that squirrel to get to the soccer ball, wherever that might be on the clock. So that's another strategy
Yep.
that could be used.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So, the ADHD traits that she talks about that are not often spoken about, but she says have been backed by, so it's not in the DSM criteria, but they're backed by experts and people with lived experience, is hyperfocus, time management issues, which we just talked about, rejection dysphoria. This was interesting. 99% of people with 99, so that's basically like all percent of people with ADHD are more sensitive to rejection than neurotypical people. And with rejection dysphoria, the feeling of criticism or rejection can become so intense that it takes over our entire beings. That was really interesting to me. Sleep problems, she talks about. And this was also really interesting to me. Um, it's because they often struggle to keep a schedule and factor in sleep due to the inability to prioritize. And then also, when an person with ADHD is tired, it makes their ADHD symptoms get worse, which makes sleeping harder, which makes them more tired, which makes their symptoms harder. So it's like a vicious cycle. Do you find that to be true with you too, Rebecca?
Yep. Yep,
Hmm.
110%. And another thing that happens for me is, well, first off, my meds have worn off by the time I'm getting ready for bed. So there's like extra noise in my head. And it's not like a sound that I hear, but it's just like, I don't know, static in my brain that I did not realize was there until I started taking meds and it went away. I was like, wait a minute. How did I live my life with all of this extra in my head that doesn't need to be there? This is crazy. But one thing, another stim that I have is braiding my hair. And I find when I'm trying to get ready for bed at night, I will just be standing there braiding my hair, knowing that I need to, like, I don't know, brush my teeth or whatever. But I'm like, nope, you know what? This is braiding my hair is more important right now. This is what I want to focus on. So this is what I'm going to stand here and do. And so it just like, if I was functioning at 100%, it would take me like, I don't know, 5 minutes to get ready for bed. But once my meds have worn off and I'm tired and I'm like reflecting on how lazy I was during the day and all of that, I'm like, it takes me like an hour to do something that typically would take like 5 minutes. And so just then when I lay down in bed, my brain is just like, we got it. We have lots of thoughts that we need to think right now. We need to like, the rejection stuff. I'm like, oh, well, I texted so and so and he never replied to me. What did I do wrong? What's like, why doesn't he want to talk to me right now? What's happening here? And it's just like, my brain gets all crazy hyperactive. And so I'm laying there like, I need to sleep. I want to sleep, but literally I cannot sleep because my brain will not let me. And it spirals down on itself and it's just
Hmm.
absolutely awful.
Hmm. Have you found anything that's been helpful for that?
Um, Reading before I go to bed is really like I am so jealous of my husband. He can just lay there and be like, "Oh, I'm so tired," and then 2 seconds later he's snoring, and I'm like, "Must be nice. I wish I could do that." And the only way I'm ever able to get to that feeling of, "Oh my gosh, I'm gonna blink one more time and I'm gonna be asleep," is if I read a book before I go to bed. Otherwise, it literally never happens to me.
Hmm. So do you think it is really valuable advice to say to parents that have a child with ADHD to really limit screen time prior to bed?
Yeah, yes and no. I think there are days where I'm like, I need something more for my brain before I get tired. I think it's important to like pay attention to what are you doing with the screen. Because if it's something like limited where like I'm gonna, play a round of a game on my phone and then have an ending point and be able to put it away, that works fine. But if it's something like I'm gonna scroll on Facebook, well, that doesn't end. And so you're never gonna stop. But if you're using the screen and there's something with a stopping point to it, for me
Hmm.
personally at least, that can be helpful. But if it's
Okay.
just an infinite, like you're gonna do this forever, like then that's horrible. Like I don't know how late
Your
I've
brain
stayed up
engaged.
scrolling.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's very interesting. That's really cool. That's a cool feedback. Because I know that this is a challenge for many of the families that I work with and many people out there that have both autism and ADHD. Yeah. The other things that she listed as traits not often spoken about are intense emotions, low tolerance for boredom, impulsive shopping, poor working memory, object permanence issues. This was something that I was like, I had never heard. And I was really like, it kind of blew my mind a little bit. So, anyone watching, object permanence, in case you didn't know, is the cognitive skill where you know that an object exists even if it's out of sight. And it's something that we develop in childhood. We're not born with it. But it is, so apparently this is challenging for an ADHD brain. So it says, as with our poor working memory, our brains require focus, even if subconsciously, to remember tasks and objects. So she says a closed computer tab to be looked at later will never be opened again. Vegetables in the crisper will go moldy because we can't see them. Clothes at the back of our wardrobes will remain unworn. This goes beyond objects and chores. It can also extend to people, out of sight, out of mind. I found that to be really interesting. So that makes sense. Like when I think about students and how they're forgetting to bring things to school. Well, if that item isn't in their backpack or isn't near their backpack, then they're probably not even in any way, shape, or form thinking about it. That item doesn't even exist to them. So no wonder they forget to pack their shoes for gym that day. So that to me says that, having something next to a backpack that really shows a picture of everything that they need could probably help. And now I understand a little bit more why.
Yeah. Yep. I like, oh gosh, I don't even know where to start. Okay, so most people have their clothes in their closet, like they'll have things in a dresser. I freaking hate dressers with a passion. I do not have a single dresser in my closet anymore, and I am so excited about that because if I don't see it, it doesn't like my brain doesn't remember it. Now there are certain things that I can remember, but there are other things I like my daughter's closet. We have one open, hangy uppy thing with cubbies and stuff on it, but we also have a little dresser for her. Don't ask me what's in that dresser because I have no freaking clue. Whereas my husband is like, why do you have everything out in the open? And I'm like, because if I don't, then it's not there. And
Mm,
so one thing that helped me with that is labeling things.
yeah.
So I have labels on my daughter's dresser so that first off to help her, develop the skill of putting her stuff away, but it's more so to help me because I'm like I don't know what goes in here. I have no idea what's in here. And then with people too, like I don't reach out to my family as much as I would like to because I'm not thinking about it. And with my friends too, thank God I have really low maintenance friends who are totally fine with me ghosting them for weeks at a time because it's like if you're not approaching me about it, I'm probably not gonna remember it. And I'm not doing that to be rude or anything. It's just literally like for me it feels like there's so much else going on in my brain. I don't have time to think about that. Or another object permanence thing for me is like brushing my teeth in the morning. I have asked my husband, I don't know how many times, like how do you like what do you need to do to brush your teeth? How do you know that you need to do that? And he's like, I don't know, I just do it. And I'm like, if my toothpaste is not in the right spot, I do not remember to brush my teeth. If my deodorant is not, I used to need to have it sitting on the counter. And if it was so stupid. If I moved it 2 inches back and put it on a shelf, my brain didn't recognize it. It wasn't there, it didn't exist, and since I didn't see it, I didn't have that visual cue to put deodorant on, and then I would forget.
Mm.
And so it's just like it's crazy how my brain just ignores things and how it just like nope, that's not there, so we're not even gonna think about it at all. And it's just like the fact that everybody doesn't struggle with that is so crazy to me because I'm like, this, I've been this way my whole life. Like I didn't realize it when I was younger, but reflecting back, like if I cannot see it, it does not exist, which is
Mhm.
why I forget things and I lose things and I don't know where stuff is. And it's just like I said, the fact that everybody's not like that is so bizarre to me because of how much I am like that.
Yeah. And it really just highlights how important it is to know this. If you have a child with ADHD or a spouse with ADHD or friends with ADHD, like to have an understanding of how their brain works so that you can approach things in a way that will work better.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then the final characteristic that she wrote was bursts of motivation based on interest. She says, when we're doing something we love, our brain rewards us with happy chemicals. So we talked about this. Our entire brain chemistry changes when we're engaged in tasks that we find rewarding, and it's our brain chemistry that sustains our focus and attention. So I thought that that was really interesting as well. So I'm seeing that we have, this has been such a great conversation. I've loved it, but I'm going to fast forward to the end of the chapter. So the middle of the chapter, she talks about the Asperger's diagnosis and its connection to Hans Asperger and why the autistic community finds that to be problematic. We talked about that a lot when we read Neurotribes. But I want to just hit some bullet points here that are important for the rest of the chapter. So before we run out of time, so one was the concept that autism is not a linear spectrum, and this came from a conversation about the problem with high functioning versus low functioning labels. So if you're watching this and you want more information on that, go watch my YouTube video, The New Language of Autism, because I go into an in-depth explanation about why high functioning and low functioning labels are problematic. And then, but in here, she talked about how people think of autism as a linear spectrum, but it's not. Instead, think of it as a color wheel. And in each section of color, there's different intensities. Not that the color is like brighter or dimmer, but in terms of like, so I've seen this before, and it almost looks like, like those Trivia Pursuit game pieces, right? And then each triangle is its own color. So in like maybe the self-care triangle, the color might fill up 3/4 of that section. And that whereas in time management, maybe it's only filling up like 1% of that. And so that just shows that that person has higher support needs in the area of time management as opposed to the area of self-care needs. So, and I'm not saying that those are the specific sections of the autism spectrum color wheel, but when you think of it like that, it is much more helpful to autistic people because it really clearly defines where they need more support and where they're able to function a little more independently.
Yep, and it's the same with ADHD. There's certain things where it's like this affects me a lot more in my life and I need more help doing this certain thing, but over here like I got that. I totally like I know stereotypically people with ADHD have like they're bouncing off the walls. I don't need any help with that because I could sit here all day and be totally fine, but I'm gonna get caught up in my head. So it's just I need different help in different ways. It's not high functioning or low functioning. It's this is where things are more difficult for me. And so this is where I need more help. And over here, I got this stuff. I don't need help with that at all.
Yeah. We all have strengths and weaknesses, right? And when we're talking about a neurotypical person, we talk about strengths and weaknesses, like if my husband is a very punctual person. I tend to run a little behind schedule, but I'm not considered low functioning because I have a hard time getting places specifically on time, because that's just not how we talk about neurotypical people. It's like he has a strength with punctuality and I have a weakness, right? But really, it's the same with autism. That's the strength, or ADHD. There's certain, and I say this to my students all the time. There's certain executive functioning skills that are going to be stronger for you than others. and some are going to be weaker. And so we're going to figure out how we can use your strengths to support your weaknesses and what supports you need to put in place so that your weaknesses are causing you less problems.
Yep.
Yeah. So then I want to just jump to the end of the chapter where she gives suggestions to neurodivergent people about what to do after a diagnosis, and then also for parents and caregivers, what to do after they receive their child's diagnosis. So for other neurodivergent people, the tips that she says is research, do your research when you get a diagnosis, and make sure that you're getting good quality research. There's a lot of like, junk out there on the internet, but get good quality research. Find support groups, and allow yourself to be neurodivergent. If you've been taught to mask these traits for your entire life, and for the first time you have an explanation and a reason for them. So she says that's why she says that people could feel like, oh, now I'm acting more neurodivergent because I have the diagnosis. And she's saying, like, no, it's just that now you're aware, you're embracing that parts of yourself, and you're not masking it as much. So it's not that you're like leaning into the diagnosis, it's just that you are relaxing more into who you are
Yeah,
because
I know
of an understanding.
for me it was, oh, this isn't something that's wrong with me. It's just the way that I am. And so I don't have to try so much to be like, nope, don't let people see that. Don't let people know about that. It's like, no, there's nothing I can do to change this. There's nothing I can do to change the way that my brain feels about this. There's nothing I can do to change the way I'm thinking about this. I have to find ways to adapt and to make sure that I'm able to function in society. There's nothing, it was just a sense of relief, and there's nothing wrong with me. It's just the way I am. And so that really is just, I'm not more ADHD. I'm just allowing myself to be who I am.
Mhm. Right. Because you understand that that is just a part of how you're wired, and it's not like a defect that you need to change. Because
Yep.
now, like, you have it, oh, well, that's just part of having an ADHD brain. So that's okay. Like, as opposed to before you realize that about yourself, you were comparing yourself to someone that has a different brain than you.
Yep. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's not what's wrong with me. It's this is what it is. And so it's going to be what it's going to be.
Yeah. And her final tip is to accept yourself. And then for the parents and caregivers, I really liked her tips. Her number one tip was tell them. And I know that this is something that parents struggle with quite a bit as to whether or not to tell their child about their diagnosis. And many parents don't tell their children until the children are much older, or sometimes people discover it for themselves and their parents don't actually ever specifically tell them. But she says, children know that they're neurodivergent. They know that they're different. I promise you that a label of autism or ADHD or whatever it may be is far better than the labels they have internally given themselves. Accept the diagnosis, listen. And she says, listen to your child's sensory needs, listen to learn the difference between meltdowns and tantrums, listen to their special interests and encourage them with everything you have. Listen when they're struggling, listen when they're glowing. Speak up for your child, but do not speak over your child, which I thought was a really good tip that you don't hear very often. She says there's a difference between being that person and being an advocate for that person and taking their voice away. And she says there's nothing more frustrating than seeing people wearing stereotypical puzzle piece t-shirts and captioning their Facebook statuses with "God gives the hardest battles to the strongest people." I understand that it's difficult. Parenting as a whole is difficult, but if you're struggling as a bystander, imagine how your child is feeling. And we had a lot of conversation about this when we read I Will Die on This Hill. And the one mother who was neurotypical and had an autistic child, how the two authors met. The other author who was autistic was giving her a hard time on her blog posts and on her comments, and saying, like, how would your child feel if he finds this on that you're his mother and you wrote this about him on the internet one day? And at first the one, and I can't remember these women's names at this moment, but the one mom, the neurotypical mom, was very triggered by the way that this woman was commenting and trolling her blogs. But eventually, she came to be very thankful and appreciative for the feedback from an actually autistic person about how her words and her perception stated publicly like that could be negatively impacting her children. Did you want to say anything on any of that, Rebecca?
I loved that part about speaking up for your child, but not over them, because I feel like as a parent, there are absolutely some things that I have a better understanding of than my kid does, but they understand themselves better than you ever will.
Hmm.
And so I feel like it's so important to differentiate. Being I am amplifying their voice versus I am being their voice. Like you can help them be heard, but you don't want to speak for them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. She goes on to say, focus on your child's strengths. Love your child unconditionally, obviously. Be gentle with yourself and with your child. So, this paragraph I had highlighted, no one is expecting you to be the perfect parent. No one is expecting you to have all the answers. No one is expecting you to change the world with your parenting, so, or get it right all the time. Be gentle with yourself and understand that it's okay to get things wrong sometimes. It's okay to not fully know what you're doing. As long as there's love, respect, and a drive to continue towards a better, more understanding future, you're doing okay. The rest will fall into place. And I just really loved that little paragraph because a lot of times when there's advocacy for from autistic individuals or even from professionals that aren't autistic about neurodiversity, there's a lot of shaming that comes into play towards parents. And I always appreciate when someone says, like, be compassionate with yourself. It's okay to make mistakes. You're not a bad person if you make a mistake or you say the wrong thing or you do some of these things that I advised against. It's just the important part is to just keep an open mind and keep learning and growing as the best you can. Did you have
Yep.
anything you wanted to say?
Well, I know that every once in a while, well, I don't want to say I feel resentment towards my parents, but every once in a while, I just think to myself, how different would my life be if my parents had known this? Because reflecting on my childhood, a lot of the conflict I had with my parents was due to things I was struggling with because of having ADHD. And so if I could take the knowledge I have now and plop it in my head and in my parents' heads back then, it would have been completely different. But I constantly am reminding myself my parents did the best that they could at the time with the information that they had. And when I was a kid, it was kind of the age of, oh, there's your kid's not listening, let's throw some meds at them. And so my parents, even if they did see what was going on, they were probably like, no, I'm busy. Mom, it's not wet. Anyway, um, like they didn't want to just throw a medication at the problem, whatever it may have been. So maybe they did see it, maybe they did know, but they didn't have the information then that I do now. And so just that constant reframing of they did the best they could at the time with the information that I actually have a tattoo that has the Maya Angelou quote, I did then what I knew how to do. Now that I know better, I do better because I'm constantly reminding myself of that. And I'm constantly thinking about how the people who I interacted with in the past were doing the best that they could. And then just looking forward into my daughter's future, I'm learning so much about what I should do, what I shouldn't do, what works for her, what doesn't work for her. And so just again, that reframing of you just have to do the best that you can. And then another thing that I personally do as a parent is I'm not afraid to apologize to my kid. Because when
Mm,
I grew up, it was like, well, my parents are right and I'm wrong, and what do I know? I'm just a kid. Like parents can screw up too. Like we all make mistakes, and it's okay to apologize for those mistakes, and it's okay to admit, you know what? I goofed up. I have more information now though, and so going forward, I'm gonna do better. So
yeah.
I have that whole paragraph in my notes too, because I was like that, like as a parent, I need that reminder, but I think everybody in general could use that reminder once in a while.
Yeah, absolutely. Brene Brown talks about like maintaining trust and the fidelity of a relationship isn't about never making mistakes or never hurting the other person, because you're bound to do that when you're in a relationship with anyone, whether it's familial, friendship, romantic. But the important part is how quickly you repair and how able you are to accept responsibility for your part in the disconnect. And that is what maintains the relationship and the trust. It's so important. Absolutely. And then the last two things she says is do not hide the diagnosis. Um, Hiding a child's diagnosis doesn't protect them, it creates further segregation, fear, and loneliness. And it also kind of inadvertently gives the impression that you're embarrassed or ashamed of the child's diagnosis. And don't try to change your child, change your mindset. And that is how the Seeking a Diagnosis chapter ends. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for this conversation. I really appreciate, and I feel like it really enhanced everything we read to hear from you, your actual lived experience and how you saw the things she was talking about play out in your life. I really have a much more robust understanding of ADHD after reading this chapter and having this conversation than I did before. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.